What's up, guys? My name is Matt, and I'm here today to talk about 10 things or so that I've learned from my time doing instrument training and what I would like to pass on to others that are either about to go into instrument or already in instrument going into their check ride. A little more about me. I have a check ride scheduled in May, so just this coming month. I've had 4 or 5 canceled check rides since January, so I've had to be check ride ready for the last 4 months or so. Unfortunately, living in Indiana means that weather is going to come in and cancel some check rides, so it's just part of the game. But I'd just like to go into the list and talk about things that you're going to expect during your instrument training, and things that I ran into and maybe had problems with, or just maybe didn't expect. But I have a list, not necessarily in order from most important to least important, but all things that you're going to expect during your instrument training as a pilot. Number one, it's just the tip for me, is fly frequently. You don't want to take time off during your instrument training. If you can fly 2 or 3 times a week, do that. I know that not everybody can, with work and everything else going on, but you're going to be in the best position to succeed if you are flying 2 or 3 times a week. If you're taking, a couple week breaks here and there, the training apathy is going to kick in, and it's going to hurt you more than you know. If you're not constantly getting clearances, if you're constantly not doing approaches, you're not going to succeed, and you're not going to succeed in the right way as an instrument pilot. Believe me, I've taken time, over my instrument training, and it's really came up and hurt me in the long run. So I don't want to see anybody have that problem. So if you can fly frequently, that's my number one tip. 2, expand your knowledge. This is a much harder rating than your private pilot. I've had a couple different CFIs tell me that it's probably the hardest rating going up to your CFI. So it's a big jump for private pilots, and to jump into this, it's so much more. It's no longer VFR stuff. You're learning everything IFR, and that comes along with it. And so you're going to really have to expand your knowledge. And I have a couple of links that I'm going to post below, and I'm going to post them in the comment section and under the video in the description, about ways that I've studied, and hopefully that you guys can look at that and get a good idea about what to study. And when I take my check ride, I'm going to come out with another video about what he asked me on the check ride, and just kind of a debrief. But it's got me through my stage checks, and I believe it has some good information on it. So go ahead and check that out for all of you that are in instrument training. But you're really going to have to expand your knowledge. It's much harder, much more in depth. Things just really get nitty gritty as an instrument pilot. Number 3, you got to know your approach plates, how to read them, how to brief them, what's the important information on there. Really, you got to know everything on there, but what the important information is to brief when you're in the airplane. Your CFI and the DP are going to want to see you brief the approach before you fly it. So before you're getting set up, you're going to know more than likely what approaches you're going to have for the day. Have them in your flight in the plate section, pull it up, and just go through. Make sure that your frequencies are tuned in, that your final approach course is set. Your minimums. What to do for the missed approach in the event that you go missed. Know all of that stuff. Be familiar with it. Know it like the back of your hand. And don't be constantly looking down, seeing your minimums. You should know that, if your minimums are, 856 for an ILS approach, don't look at it. Know that, and so fly the airplane, fly the glide slope, fly the localizer down, and know when you get to 856 that's where you need to see the visual indicators to land. But don't be constantly looking down. That's why you brief the approach plate. So just get familiar with those. It's it's actually a lot easier once you get to know what those things are telling you, because in VFR you just went to the airport and landed however you wanted. But this, it gives you a step-by-step instruction on what to do. And even on an ILS, you literally just follow the glide slope and the localizer down. So it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it, but getting the hang of it is the tricky part. Okay, number 4, I have know how to fly a hold / unpublished hold. A published hold are pretty easy to fly. They're normally depicted, on an approach. You can do it as a procedure term, or, ATC can have you flying it to get traffic in and out. But the unpublished hold is the one that I had some trouble with. CFI, made me do a couple unpublished holds. That's what you're going to see more than likely in real world IFR flying. And that'll be just where ATC has you with them and they say, hey, fly on the 060 radial off of such and such VOR, 5 nautical miles from the VOR, 2 mile legs. So you have to tune to the VOR, to the 060 radial, 5 DME off of the VOR, fly 2 nautical mile legs, and that's just an unpublished hold. They can give it to you anywhere, but that's just an example of one that I've done. But it's a good trick to know because it kind of gets overlooked sometimes on instrument. You're just doing kind of the stuff that, I don't know, the main stuff, and that kind of gets overlooked. So that's a good one. If you ask your CFI to have you do an unpublished hold, he'd be impressed with that, I'm sure. Number 5, going along with that, I guess, VOR approaches can be tricky, and they have been for me. That's probably been the hardest one that I've done approach-wise, and what I can do in my airplane. We haven't done an MDB approach, but VOR approaches are pretty tricky, I've found. And especially VOR alpha approaches, the circling approach that gets you just in the vicinity of the airport, and then you have to do the maneuvers to circle to land. But just really go over VOR approaches. For me, it took a bit of understanding to get, to know what was going on with the VOR approach. Now I've got it down pretty well, that I've done them enough where I feel fairly confident with the VOR approaches I've done. But those ones can be a little tricky, so you're going to expect those, and sometimes they can have you center line to the runway, and that's pretty straightforward. But sometimes they're a little catty corner, or like I said with the VOR alpha, they're just getting you in the vicinity and you got to circle. So just know your what your circling minimums are, and how far you can be away to circle and land based on your approach speed. Know the different types of Rnav approaches. For us and for me, we don't have a WAS capable GPS, so we can only do one type of Rnav approach. So it's pretty straightforward for me to had to learn that, how to fly it, but that doesn't mean that I don't have to know that information that could be potentially asked on the check ride. Just because I can only fly one specific Rnav approach doesn't mean I shouldn't know about LNAV, this VNAV, LPV, all of that stuff. You got to know a little bit about it. He's not going to expect you to be an expert level, I'm sure, but know enough to get yourself through a conversation about it. It's a good thing. So just know the different types of Rnav approaches. They're listed in the AIM. That's where I've gone through and looked. I'm sure you can look online too, but the AIM is a good place to look, and they have all the different types of Rnav approaches and kind of a brief description of all of them. So go through that. I know I've had to be asked on my orals during my stage checks about that, so I know it will be on the check ride. Number 7 is weather matters even more than it did in private pilot. Weather is such a big thing in aviation, and even more so, couldn't be said more for instrument. And the stuff that you have to know for private kind of expands, because now you're flying in weather that is less than VFR minimums. So you're flying in worse weather, so you have to be able to see what's going on, know what's going on, know how to get your weather, know how to get your weather briefings, know what you're seeing on those weather briefings. It's all important, because you don't want to run into icing or run into a thunderstorm or something like that. or just go into clouds and not know where the heck you are. So um, it's really important in all aspects of aviation, but especially for instrument, you're really going to have to know everything about weather. So don't overlook that, you private pilot guys. It is not going to go away, unfortunately. Number 8, how to talk to ATC and how to get your clearances. This is a huge one. You learn specific things, and if you did a lot of flight following in private pilot, that's going to help you out. But getting your clearances for IFR flights, for flight planes, getting your craft clearances, talking to ATC, getting them, switching your communication from local control to your local control to center, or approach. It's a big jump in communication, so you're really going to have to learn the verbiage. I'd say, just have your CFI do it, kind of pick up on what he's saying, or he or she, and pick up, on what they're saying, and go from there. Also go to liveatc, I believe.com. I've gone on there, and it's really helped me listen to professional pilots about how they interact and talk with ATC. And when you hear it enough, it makes you a little bit more comfortable to go do it yourself. So it's always a scary thing. My CFI really just threw me in the fire and said, "You're doing all the communication today." And I'm like, "Oh, great." But I got through it. I mean, I kind of fumbled around, and if he needs to, help you out, then he'll step in and, correct you if you made a mistake. But that's just kind of the best way to learn. At least it was for me, even though I didn't like it at the time. Number 9, my tip is fly complicated approaches in sim. If you have a simulator, full motion, a nice one that has access to all these, go ahead and ask your CFI to do more complicated approaches if you can. That's what I've done. I've had some more difficult approaches, over in Colorado, and different approaches that my CFI thought would be good training tools that I've used. And when I go fly that same approach here in Indiana, it's a lot easier. It's like a walk in the park. So fly more complicated approaches in sim. It's good training. And when you go out in the real world and you're flying your approaches around you, hopefully they'll be a little bit easier than what you've been doing in the simulator. So that is a nice one. And even just go over in the simulator the approaches that you're going to be doing there too, because that's good practice, and you're not eating up all your flight time if you're messing up your approaches. So that's a good tool to do. And number 10, same with private pilots, but especially more for this, don't get behind the airplane. Make sure you've got, if you know what your first approach is for the day, load it in on the ground. Maybe you can't activate it, but load in your frequencies. Make sure that you are ready to tune in the final approach course. If you're doing an ILS, make sure you got your localizer frequency in, and then you're ready to do the Morse code and check and see if it's working. If you're flying to a VOR to set up for an approach, get the VOR tuned in. All of that stuff, get ahead of it before you go fly, because the last thing you want to do is get set up for the approach and you don't have the localizer frequency tuned in. You don't have your you haven't tuned in your weather, and you're having to scramble for the weather as you're setting up for the approach. You want to do that stuff beforehand. So look at your checklist. Make sure that you're with your checklist, but on top of that, make sure that you are thinking ahead what you're going to do for the next approach. And even if you've got what you're going to do, you're going to fly an Rnav approach first, then you're going to do the ILS. We'll get done with the Rnav. As soon as you get done with the Rnav, then you're going up, get to level flight, get to where everything's okay, and then clarify that you're going to do the ILS next. And then when you get the confirmation that you are, go ahead and tune in all of that stuff. So all of that stuff will make you not get behind the airplane, and it will make your life a lot better during instrument training. You're going to find the best way to handle that for yourself, but you've got to figure out a way that works for you. But these are kind of my tips that I've gone through. I'm going to come out with a video debriefing my check ride when it happens. It's been unfortunate. I was hoping to just make a video after that, but I've had 4 or 5 canceled ones. Just thank you, Indiana weather. But nothing we can do about that. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the support I've gotten in my first video about private pilot, and I hope that I can help some people out that are going through instrument training. And I'll come out with more videos about stuff that I've gone through and things that I can pass on to others. So thank you guys for watching, and hope you have a good one.